All right.
True or
Okay.
false? More money was spent on political ads in 2024 than Netflix. True or false?
Just ads. Just adverts.
Just ads.
Just ads.
I'm gonna say. I'll let you answer first. Actually.
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna say more money was spent on political ads. Is that
Than
what you're saying?
Netflix.
I'll
Than
say it's true.
Netflix?
I'll say it's true.
You say true?
I'll say it's true.
I want to say it's false, just because I mean they spent an insane amount of money, but I feel like Netflix should be raking it in.
It's true. More money was
Let's
spent
go.
on political ads.
Everyone was cutting their Netflix. Everyone was cutting their Netflix. I saw the memes. I saw it. I saw people saying they ain't buying Netflix no more.
It's the only way you can afford a mortgage.
Yeah.
Cut your Netflix, stop having coffee, you get a mortgage.
No avocado toast.
That's an actual thing that's kicking around the UK right now.
What's
like, stop buying avocados,
Yeah.
don't buy coffee, don't have Netflix, and you can buy a house. That is an actual thing that's kicking around in the UK public.
They've been saying that for years.
Absolutely. Okay.
There's an article out there about millennials can't afford a home because they spend their money on avocado toast. That I
Yeah.
think about.
Though. We have the same thing here. I think our avocados are more expensive though.
As if baby boomers don't spend money on stupid shit.
UK once spent 5 million to promote walking. The UK once spent 5 million pounds to promote walking. Mike, you go first. True or false?
I mean that seems believable to me. Yeah, sure, true.
Yeah, I'd go with true. That sounds
That
like
feels
something
like the
we
kind of
do.
thing a government would spend money on.
True. Correct.
Yeah.
2-1, isn't it? We've got to keep score because, yeah.
Very American to keep score. We have to win it.
Same here. We have to as well.
A US senator tried to ban ketchup on hot dogs in Chicago.
Fuck.
Now, you got to know this, Mike.
A U.S. senator?
A
tried to
US
ban-
senator tried to ban ketchup on hot dogs in Chicago. You're from Chicago, or you living there?
It's an extremely believable thing for an Illinois politician to do. I'm gonna say true. If the fact that it's a U.S. senator has me a little bit thrown off. Like I feel like it might have been like an alderman or something. And you're trying to trick me up, but I'll say true because I buy that. People around here are wacky without ketchup on hot dogs.
Yeah, I want to go with true as well. So I remember there was like an American senator or something like that who said, if this boxer doesn't get a title match, there's going to be a congressional hearing. And I was like, yeah, these fuckers are crazy. They love this shit though. They live for this shit. And I'm like, yeah, they're not dealing with inflation. They're like, motherfucker, if Thomas Hearns does not get a title fight, I swear to God.
Okay,
All right.
It's false. No,
Fuck.
It's false.
Cooked.
Taylor Swift 2024 tour generated more than all presidential campaigns in 2024.
I'll go with true.
I'll go with true as well.
You're both correct. 4.1 billion.
Yeah, she made loads of money. She was given out in the UK.
4.1
I
billion.
saw her at Wembley, by the way. I
Mad.
flew out to London with my wife to see her at Wembley because it was cheaper to do that than it was to see her in the US.
That's wild.
It's because that Ticketmaster stuff. Is that why?
God bless. It was like $600 for the ticket, and I was like, I'll do that in a heartbeat. $600 is still ridiculous, but it was less ridiculous. So,
That's crazy, man.
that's great.
Welcome everyone to the Sunday Roast, and we've got a US special and back with a bang for 2025. Madge, can you please introduce yourself? Because Mike, I'm going to give you the floor, and you're going to be able to chat away about yourself. Madge, my co-host.
Yeah. I'm Big Match Studios. I run the Big Match Studios YouTube channel. We talk about British politics. Not a ton on American stuff yet, but it will be spicing up this year, no doubt, with the return of the Donald. And so that's why we have a very special guest. Alex, you want to introduce him?
Yeah, Mike. I'm not going to introduce myself. Mike, can you please introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'm Mike Dellis. I have 2 decades of experience working in democratic politics, basically at the intersection of using emerging digital technologies to create change and help Democrats win the occasional election. I'm a former senior advisor to Kamala Harris. I oversaw all of her digital from basically when she was Attorney General of the great state of California through her presidential campaign until she joined the Biden ticket. I was not involved in the last race. Officially on the campaign, I did other stuff and have been working on other races. My other big clients include like Senator Adam Schiff from California, who's a big name, Governor Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. And I do a lot of nonprofit work. So I work with the United Nations, and I've done work with Red Nose Day and Brennan Center for Justice and stuff like that. The thing I'm probably the best known for is helping to raise money online. So I've raised over $1 billion in low dollar grassroots fundraising for my clients, including Kamala and Schiff and a bunch of others. But also
1 billion.
Say again?
1 billion.
1 billion. Yeah.
1 billion. Where do you store it all? Where is that all stored?
Bank accounts somewhere. So, you know, the Fort Knox in Kentucky. We just put it in gold bonds down there. So yeah, and I'm the founder of Authentic. It's digital fundraising and marketing shop. We have about 30-40 employees. Just really awesome people I get to work with every day, trying to fight the worst of this stuff in a country that doesn't seem to want to head in the direction I'd like it to.
Is it one of those things where you get the feeling that everyone makes the worst decision possible? I mean, we're going to focus on US politics, but there's always that thing with Brexit being like, everyone talks about that being the catalyst for all these big populist movements. And you sort of look over in the States and it's not far off in terms of rhetoric, what's being said and everything else. Do you feel as if it's just impossible to stop this storm?
No, I don't think it is. I think that these populist movements, you know, like Trump, are good at taking advantage of the mistakes of an establishment that is, I think, not functioning for the American people. Like, look, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016, I think primarily because of good timing more than anything else. And we can like really get into that if you want to, but like in this last election, Trump got reelected because inflation was so bad. And if you look all around the country, like Western democracies, the ruling power is getting crushed because of inflation. And one problem that, you know, and again, we haven't gotten into like our own personal politics here, but like we're all generally on the left to center, right? I assume on this call, and probably most of your audiences too. We spend a lot of time trying to get people to care about other people and other problems. And we try to, I think, like tug at heartstrings sometimes. But most people, I think voters, when they go to the ballot box, they're inundated with information and they're fundamentally self-interested. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? I think like most people in the United States went to the polls, they were like, man, I might care about abortion, but the price of eggs is really expensive right now. I'm struggling to figure out how to retire. I'm young. I don't know how to get a job that's going to help me, you know, buy a house and start a family. And I think if you can't see your path to that, you're going to blame the party in power. And it's one of the few opportunities you have to make a difference. Because like when you're in the workplace, you can't stop your boss from making whatever dumb decision you don't like. No. You can't force them to give you a raise most of the time, but you can go to the ballot box and you can pull the lever for the other guy. And it doesn't, a mistake that practitioners in my space make all the time is they go, well, you know, 49.9% of the country voted for Donald Trump. That means they're endorsing everything that Donald Trump says and does. And be like, no, not really. Like buyer's remorse is going to set in pretty quickly here because Donald Trump promised to get grocery prices down and he promised to make housing more affordable and he promised to
he backtracked.
Right.
Yeah, he's backtracked before he's gotten in.
Right.
Who does that?
Plotting an invasion plan for Greenland right now. Like, I mean, the whole thing's ridiculous. So
do you think he actually thinks it's green so he can turn it into farmland and that'll get the grocery price?
Money. Do you think it's the land of money? Green is money.
No, I think it's I think it's definitely like natural resources. Like it's always like with anything with Trump, anything in American politics, it's immediately just follow the money. So I think it's some weird attempt to, I don't know that they'll actually do anything with it. With Trump, the challenge is always, where does the rhetoric stop and the action begins? Because he just says a lot of shit. And you never know what's real and what's not real with him. And that's part of the game that he's playing. But it's a facade that he puts on, and he puts it on really well, but I don't know.
I get that feeling because part of his campaign when he went against Clinton was he was going to lock her up.
Hillary Clinton has to go to jail, okay? She has to go to jail.
She's crooked as a $3 bill. Lock her up is right.
For what she's done, they should lock her up. She's disgraceful.
Crooked Hillary, wait. Crooked, you should lock her up, I'll tell you.
You should lock them up.
Hillary Clinton, I didn't say lock her up, but the people would all say lock her up, okay.
And then it never happened.
Right.
And then you're sort of like, which was really interesting because like the Democrats then did the exact thing that they said they were going to do, but that was also like try and lock him up. But to be fair, he attempted a coup. So
no, I don't think. I mean, look, I don't think that Democrats set out to lock Donald Trump up. Like that wasn't something that Joe campaigned on in 2020, right? But Donald Trump got himself in a series of messes. You know, the most recent, he became, you know, he got found guilty in the New York fraud trial. But he did that thing. A jury of his peers found him guilty. I mean, my problem is that just this weaponization of the legal process period in a way that just undermines everything. And like, I want to be able to trust the Department of Justice to keep me and my family safe. I think most people want that. And the more that we politicize that stuff, and that happens on both sides. Like the mayor of New York right now, New York City right now, is under investigation for a myriad of things, but like the sort of
wasn't that Sabrina Carpenter as well? Didn't she get him in trouble somehow?
Should we talk about how I got the mayor indicted, or?
and then
I'm
it's like
too,
a whole
I'm too old to
investigation.
really know who's Sabrina
Yeah,
Carpenter.
yeah, don't worry, we're both too old. Don't worry about it. No, it's not
Yeah.
just you. It's me.
This
Trust
is
me.
like
Don't worry about it.
when everybody was mad at Chappell Roan for the way she endorsed Kamala Harris like a couple months ago. My immediate response was, "Who is Chappell Roan?" Because I just didn't know. And I had to get, and I got yelled at by like every Gen Z staff around my team. And they were like, "She's the greatest artist of all time." And I'm like, "Well, she's not Taylor Swift." So no, but I mean, like, look, I'm gonna like reduce it down because he's done a bunch of other stuff. But like one of the things he did is he took a bribe in the form of like free airline miles and upgrades on Turkish Airlines with the Turkish government. And he's doing the same thing. Like the playbook that he's playing is very similar to the playbook that Trump played. So, but when you're a celebrity and you're in a position of power, like the shit you do is significant. So like that's a problem that I think permeates both parties. Trump is just the poster child for it. And the problem is in the United States, I think to an average person that's, working a job and raising a couple kids and trying to survive and hoping they can drink a beer and watch Monday Night Football, they're like, both sides suck and both sides are corrupt and nobody's going to help me and nothing changes. And Trump thrives in an environment like that because then he's just way more brazen about it. And he'll tell you, I'm breaking the system so that I can help you, when in reality he's breaking the system to enrich him and his friends. But then we have no moral high ground to stand on. And that's a huge problem that I don't really have a solution for today.
He did say the forgotten man will never be forgotten, and then he immediately forgot about them. So
Forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
that's one of the things he did run on really well, especially against Hillary Clinton. I think like he got away with saying a lot, and she just couldn't fight back, and that's kind of how that one ended.
Yeah.
But I do agree with the inflation point. Like we had the same problem in the UK as well. I think inflation is one of the things that killed our former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, where people were just mad, and it just didn't make sense, the stuff they were saying.
Yeah, not been
Definitely.
And inflation not been as bad. I think Kamala Harris wins this presidential election. I do.
It was down to, what was it, 1.8 million?
Yeah,
There
it was
was, like,
basically
three
just
states.
180,000 votes in 3 battleground states because we have the Electoral College. We were actually perilously close to a situation where Kamala Harris would have won the Electoral College but lost the popular vote, which I think was hilarious. I think because Republicans, they've been crowing about how great their Electoral College wins are for, I think it's a Republicans only won the popular vote in my lifetime twice, which is crazy. But we've had a Bush and then Trump the first time, and it would have been really funny. It would have been funny. I think it would have been destabilizing to the government because I think that the right wing in this country would have lost their minds if the system worked against them. But like right now, like the Electoral College bias was in Democrats' favor right now. And I don't think that people have really noticed that. But like if that trend continues, like if we have an Electoral College advantage, or if we turn Texas a little bit more blue, like that would be sort of the reverse of the situation where, we've been arguing to get rid of the Electoral College.
The United States uses a system called the Electoral College to choose its president. Instead of adding up all votes from across the country, each state awards a set number of electors to the candidate who wins in that state. The number of electors each state gets depends on its population size. After the election, these electors meet to formally vote for the president. This means a candidate can become president even if they do not receive the most votes from individual citizens.
And I would tell you, we should get rid of it regardless, because I think the majority should rule in this country. But it doesn't. But we were really close to that, and it would have been pretty funny.
It's quite wild, isn't it? It keeps talking about Canada. That would be the extra 2 senators and several extra seats in the lower house, wouldn't it, if he actually took over Canada or Canada joined, which I find quite funny, or if he took over Greenland, or I assume they would get 2 senators if he did do it in that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's thought that through. But there's plenty of precedent for annexing. And again, I'm not endorsing any of these plans. So for somebody that's mad at me, they could annex Greenland or buy Greenland. I mean, it's not unprecedented for the United States to buy land. We bought Alaska. We bought Louisiana. Yeah. We bought the Virgin Islands in 1920 or something like that. So it happens. But they're protectorates, right? I mean, Alaska got made a state. But Puerto Rico's not a state, and the Virgin Islands aren't a state, and DC is not a state. So there are lots of people who are disenfranchised. So what stopped them from saying Greenland is ours, but it's not a state, it's just a protectorate. So we don't have to mess up with their math. But I don't know the politics of Greenland very well, but I have to imagine that's got to be 2 Democratic senators. Just knowing the way the rest of the world.
Yeah. They're Scandi, so they tend. I mean, Denmark less so, but the rest of the Scandinavians tend to be on the left.
You could call Canada if they want to. You can call it expansion.
I did a little bit of work in on a Canadian race that I honestly forget the players of it, but I remember like learning about Canadian politics. I did this in Ireland too. I was doing a little bit of Irish politics, and it was like the center in those countries were so much further to the left than the mainland Democratic Party was. It was like everything was just so different. And I was like, man, what is wrong with this setup here? It was just so different, and also so much more pleasant too, which I appreciated.
In all honesty, the Democratic Party, if they were based in the UK, they'd be very right wing. They would be like where our the Reform Party, our Nigel Farage's party. They'd be in like economics. They would be probably about there. Socially, they'd probably be more where the Conservative Party are, but economically, they'd be quite far out there.
I felt that Biden was more to the left, probably more to the left than our Labour government at the moment in some of the policies that he was putting forward.
Yeah,
like
the investment stuff. Yeah.
The green investment program, from what I read, was like, wow, that's taking a strip out of FDR. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Incentivizing the money and making people move in the direction and encouraging green investment. It's a no-brainer if they can get the manufacturing up. It seemed to be like a good one. But you couldn't. I mean, it was just to go back on something actually. When you said there was something you said earlier, Mike, about politicizing the justice system and the DOJ. When Nixon dropped out, there wasn't this big hoo-ha about him resigning and then having an investigation. The hoo-ha came afterwards when Ford said, I'm going to pardon him. And I thought that was really interesting because no one seemed to get, everyone was like, yeah, go and impeach Nixon. And if we can, bang him up. But there didn't seem to be this pushback. And yet when Trump goes and does this, I mean, I'd love to talk to you about Harris and everything else. It's just something that you said that I find interesting. I never get seen brought up, or very rarely. Nixon wasn't a problem, but Trump was in terms of impeachment and using the DOJ against him. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, Nixon, to me, when you go back and look at the erosion of trust in institutions in the United States, you go back to like the Pentagon Papers and you go back to Nixon. And that was sort of that moment where people went, oh, I actually can't trust the White House and I actually can't trust the government. And then
the Pentagon Papers were a secret government report started in 1967 to investigate the United States' involvement in the Vietnam War. The papers showed that several US administrations had secretly increased the war effort and had lied to the public about its progress and goals. The leak caused a national controversy, made people trust the government less, and significantly influenced public opinion against the Vietnam War.
This cascading series of events where like every time something happened, whether it's like Reagan with Iran-Contra, or it's Clinton with the Lewinsky scandal, or all the like the Scooter Libby stuff with Bush. I don't know if anybody remembers all of that. I do. I'm just old enough to remember all of that. And then like Obama really was pretty scandal free. I feel like for 8 years. I don't think we knew what we had for that 8 years with Barack Obama. Like it was pretty sweet. And then you get into like Hillary Clinton's emails, and you get into Trump and the pandemic and all the corruption that went into the first term. Like people just don't trust institutions, and I think people have now been trained. I'm out for me. And like, I'll just tell you, like, I don't come from a very political family. I come from an aggressively middle-class family. My dad was a law enforcement officer, and he raised me. He was like, look, the only people that are going to take care of you and your circle of people is you. And I think that's how more people than you would think go through life. And I think it's because they don't think the government's coming to save them, and they don't think that their community's coming to save them. And that makes us more scared. But there's, with what happened to Nixon, he clearly made a deal with Ford to get that pardon. It's like, I'm going to resign. You're going to become president. You have an opportunity to lead this party and go run an election. And then he gets throttled by Carter. But you're gonna pardon me and to move the nation forward, however they framed it. But people were pretty pissed when that happened back then. But there's all these old videos you can find of like people going to more conservative parts of the country. I saw one not too long ago. You can find them on YouTube doing like interviews in like diners and stuff. Where they were like, oh, I love Nixon. I can't believe what they did to Nixon. The deep state was out to get him. Like,
that to this day, your mother's perception of Watergate is that it was partly an international scheme, or at the very least, that double agents were involved.
But I say that in the context of the suspicious circumstances of the discovering the burglars, the break-in. That seemed to be almost a setup. It was such a sloppy job. It was, there are books that say the CIA was involved.
I think that there's been too much play of it, and I think it's probably both sides do the same thing all the time.
I worked for the New York Committee to re-elect the president. I have confidence in the president. I think perhaps that he was hoodwinked.
I really don't think he had anything to do with it.
All the stuff that's happening now is stuff that happened 40, 50 years ago. Like none of it's new. It's always existed. The difference is that the internet gives you such an incredible ability to see it and then spread it to the point that it reaches like Elon Musk, who owns X, and then makes it the front page of every time you open up the darn website. So it's just it's a different problem, but it's the same problem.
I saw a claim. I haven't. This needs to be fact checked. I saw a claim that
Lyndon Johnson
talking about the size of his penis.
Let's talk about our 36th president, Lyndon B. Johnson. Yes, his name was very appropriate. Johnson bragged about the size of his penis constantly. According to Robert Caro's biography, he nicknamed it Jumbo. And when a colleague would approach him in the Capitol bathroom, Johnson, finishing, would sometimes turn to him with his penis in his hand, shaking it as if showing off, and say, "Have you ever seen anything as big as this?"
Not since yesterday, Mr. President.
A lot, as you said, a lot of this stuff has repeated itself in the past. The insults, the controversies, and everything else. There isn't actually too much that's new in politics, but it feels new because we've actually had, as you said, in our lifetime, quite a cleansed version of this, relatively cleansed. I mean, you know, Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton, that was quite wild to unfold and watch as it unfolded. I guess.
Well, and by the way, like meanwhile, while all that's happening, it feels like a sideshow to the American people because their lives don't get any better and things just get harder. Yeah. And so that's why, like, when, like, you know, people on the left and on my team scream like, why don't they care about the insurrection and why don't they care about this and that and the other thing, and Trump being a convicted felon, and be like, it's not that people don't care about it, it's that right now they don't trust us to help them get through their lives, and they think it'll be, they remember it being a little bit easier when Trump was in office, which people have short memories. I don't think they remember the pandemic, which was horribly mismanaged. But to me, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I'll tell you, coming into the election, I didn't think people were as pissed at us as to go back to him. I thought we were going to win. I thought it'd be close, but I thought Harris was going to win. I thought she had done enough. But people were upset, and I think they have every right to be.
But you weren't the only one. Alan Nickman, the prophet of who will be elected, got it absolutely wrong. I mean, it was wild watching that unfold.
He's the Keys guy, right?
That's the guy with the White House, yeah. And he's got a live YouTube. It's really good. But you just saw his face and he was like, right, I'm not doing any interviews tomorrow. I was just like, goodbye.
He lost.
I'll just tell you, like for me, the way I think about it is like, as somebody who works day in and day out on so many different races, the academic view, and Alan, I think he's a nice guy. I don't have any problem with that. I think I've met him like once or twice. I just, like, anytime I listen to the academic view of what's happening in American politics, my brain turns off. I fall asleep because it just, like, it's not rooted in reality. So he's like, there's these 6 keys and these 6 keys predict blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, politics is super simple. Like, I don't think it's as complicated as we think it is. When we get into the election and the media is like making you feel like it's a freaking roller coaster going up and down every day, it seems more complicated than it is. But like, once I got a good night's sleep after the election, I was like, oh yeah, we got killed on inflation. And when you go look at the numbers, you're like, we had an 8 to 10 point swing nationwide across the country away from the Democratic Party. Like, it should have been a 1984 or a 2008 style wipeout for the Democratic Party, and it wasn't. Because Trump was such a bad candidate, because Trump is so unlikable, because Kamala Harris ran a good campaign. Now, she's going to take the brunt of the criticism because she lost, and when you're the losing candidate, you lose. But like, I'll tell you, like, I thought Mitt Romney ran a really good campaign in 2012 and was a pretty good candidate for the Republicans. But Barack Obama was a once-in-a-generation politician, and you can tell that because there's no politician even remotely close to him that has that level of talent and savvy and ability to connect with people. So like, Romney, I think, actually should get his flowers for running a better campaign than in 2012 that people give him credit for. And I think 10 years from now, people will go back and look at Kamala and go, okay, was it perfect? No, clearly, but it was a pretty good campaign. And I'm really proud of the people who put it together with 100 days notice. And as someone who worked for her for a long time, I'm really proud of her for stepping into that, because she saved us from getting absolutely hammered. Like, we should have lost way more House seats. We didn't lose. We actually picked up House seats, by the way. I think that's an underreported part of it. But like, we should have lost more Senate seats. We should have lost more states. Like, it should have been really bad, and it wasn't. Like, Trump could have a 58 to 60 seat majority in the Senate right now, which would make it virtually impossible for Democrats to stop anything from happening. Like, he could actually just invade Greenland at that point. But he doesn't. He has 53, and he has a 3-seat majority in the House. So
where do you think it went? Where do you think it did go wrong then? What do you think was the? I mean, I've got answers. I'm more asking on behalf of our viewers. Where do you think it went wrong?
Yeah. So I think you have to kind of bifurcate it into before Biden dropped out and after Biden dropped out, because they're two different eras, and you kind of have to talk about the different problems. Like with Joe, and I love Joe Biden. I think he's a patriot. I think he was a good president. I think he did a lot more right than he did wrong. But one of the wrongs was he shouldn't have run for a second term. And he should have been more honest with people about where his health was and his ability to do it. I mean, hell, it was just last week. He was like, I don't know if I was up to a second term. And I'm like, buddy, I love you. But if you were saying you're not up for a second term, you shouldn't have been running for a second term. And so that's problem number one. And if he wasn't going to run, you know, he drops out after the presidential debate, but like he should have made that decision 2 years ago. And he should have given the entirety of the Democratic Party an opportunity to have a rigorous vetting process in the primary to build campaigns and build our candidates up. I believe had he done that, Kamala Harris would have been the most likely person to have won that primary, but she would have had an opportunity to establish herself outside of Biden's wing in a way that she wasn't able to do in this 100-day period. And she would have been out there doing reps. She would have had to have gone to South Carolina and Michigan and all the other states to win. Like those primaries are really important to development, to leadership development and candidate development. People remember Barack Obama as he was president of the United States. They don't remember him. And I was at his first event in Iowa, in Morningside Community College in Iowa, which is friggin' nowhere. But he's running the Iowa caucus. I was there. He was good, but like he was like 8 out of 10 of what was possible for Barack Obama then. And he built that in the trenches. And Kamala Harris should have had that opportunity to do that again. And she just didn't have that. And in the same way, if she wasn't the right candidate, if there was another Democratic candidate out there who would have been able to rise, Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker, like anybody else that's out there, they should have had the same opportunity to prove, hey, I'm the new voice of the Democratic Party and given the voters a chance. So that's just number one mistake there. The second mistake that falls into that bucket too is on the inflation period, which is inflation globally has been horrible. The US has actually experienced less inflation than the rest of the world. I think most of the rest of the Western world, right? If we had done more, I think, to make people, one, understand the pain that they were going to go through, and if two, we had done more to help them, so make them feel seen and provide immediate relief, I would have cut checks to people. I would have. Now that would have like increased inflation a little bit. You'll find a lot of economists who will say, well, that would have made things worse, and they're probably not wrong. But I also have to win an election because the alternative is I'm going to have tariffs, which are going to that's going to skyrocket inflation. If he puts a 20% tariff on all Canadian goods, it's going to gas prices are going to skyrocket. So I would have just done more populist, immediate, direct action to people. And some of the challenge was Biden, by virtue of his age and deteriorating health, and I think he's all there mentally. Like I don't buy any of these not there mentally stuff, but the deterioration of his health made it harder for him to campaign and communicate with the American people. And like we passed this huge infrastructure bill where he should have been at every single ribbon cutting. Barack Obama was when he passed an infrastructure bill in 2009. He was everywhere. That's 101. Couldn't execute it. So that's all the things that get us to then Kamala Harris becoming the nominee. And then if I'm identifying like the couple of things that, if I'm Monday morning quarterbacking the campaign, and I'll tell you, I thought the campaign was good. I do. And I don't buy any of the people who are saying it was a bad campaign or that she was a bad candidate. I think that's a lot of let me get clicks because it's easy to shit on people when they lose. But I think one, getting Harris out there earlier to do more interviews and not just like traditional TV interviews. Like, I don't care if she goes on NBC News and does an interview with Lester Holt, like that doesn't win anybody over. But I think they should have done things like go on Joe Rogan. I think they should have done things like go on Hot Ones and do interviews that way, meet people where they are and introduce her to the American people in a way that they didn't see her. And that was a mistake. I think they needed to find more areas to distance themselves from Biden because he was so unpopular. But really, they had just a monumental task of building a campaign in 100 days and articulating a messaging strategy in 100 days. And they came damn near close to victory. Yeah. And I saw a lot of polls after the Joe Biden presidential debate. We were dead. The Democratic Party was dead. And I'm actually very grateful that we're I would prefer the Kamala had won, obviously, but we're in a much better position than we probably should have been based on the fundamentals of that election. So
did you see the polling under Biden when they released the internal polling they had as to what the result would have been if Biden stayed? Did you see anything like that? It was a massacre. It was honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen lots of private polling. Like I had clients in states and districts that you wouldn't imagine freaking out about their electoral prospects. Like my brother, who's like, about as to the left of me, was so mad about the Biden situation that he was like, I might have to vote for Trump. So like it was in a bad spot. I think people were really mad at us. And one thing we're going to have to reckon with, and we're going to have to stare into the abyss on, is the lack of faith that people have in the Democratic Party because they are mad at us that in their view, we covered up Joe Biden's health. Now, I don't really think that's what happened. I think it was a lot more innocent than that. but we angered a lot of people, and that plus inflation was like a 1-2 death knell in the election.
I mean, the first debate, I don't think any of us can argue that there were some clips that were horrific, and he just lost his train of thought for whatever reason.
Yeah. Every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
But
the kicker 90 seconds into the debate, we were in trouble.
But the kicker there is Trump has done the exact same thing, but it doesn't seem to have got through in terms of messaging.
Never say the silence of the lips. The late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man. He oftentimes would have a friend for dinner.
That was Republican frontrunner and convicted felon Donald Trump last month, offering his thoughts on a cool new movie that was released 33 years ago. But did anyone question Donald Trump's mental fitness or even his basic connection to the time-space continuum? No, they did not.
And the other flip around was, as soon as all that messaging about Biden being too old to run had to stop as soon as Harris comes in. And yet I never felt there was traction from what I was observing over here, that people were really slamming down on Trump and his age and him losing his thoughts and also rambling and also making incoherent sentences. And I thought that was quite interesting to observe.
Well, it's a good example of, like, it's different when you're the president of the United States. Like, holding the job is different than being a candidate for the job. And I think we sometimes try to, like, be like, well, it's an even playing field, and so it's not fair if they're not covering it the same way. Like, Donald Trump in next week will be the oldest person ever inaugurated as president of the United States. He will be older than Joe Biden at the end of his term. And I do agree. He does seem like he has some mental deterioration and train of thought issues. The challenge is, like, he's always kind of been like that. So you're never like, is he crazy or not? And you get these sort of out of context clips where he's
This is where I play the clip of him talking about nuking a hurricane.
Yes.
Yeah. Or the map thing where he changed it on the map to show that he was right. Yeah. That's great.
But that was the original chart, and you see it was going to hit not only Florida but Georgia. It could have was going toward the Gulf. That was what was originally projected, and it took a right turn. And ultimately, hopefully, we're going to be lucky. It depends on what happens with South Carolina, North Carolina.
I listened to his entire interview on Joe Rogan, all 2 hours of it, and it was horrible. There were times where I liked him. There were times when I was like, I kind of get, like, I get it. I would never vote for him, but I was like, I sort of get the appeal here to this guy. But there were times when he was talking about, like, windmills causing cancer and stuff, and I was like, what the hell are you talking about?
And Wales.
If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You told me that one, okay?
Yeah.
Right. Wales. I think that's the clip that went super viral, right? But it's harder to do that. And the other thing is, like, you're building a campaign with 100 days. That's not a lot of time. I know in Europe, that's a lot of time for a campaign because you guys are used to snap elections, right? Where you have
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yeah,
right.
6
weeks. Just kind of did one in Ireland. It was a very different experience. And it's very different here. Like, the apparatuses are huge. The paid media communication is huge. But again, Harris came really close to winning this race. And I think the three issues that we got killed on was inflation. And then people were very mad about the border and safety on that front. And, like, we don't do a very good job of communicating about the border and, like, why our view of it is I think, stronger often. And I think, and this dovetails into the third issue that we lost on too, which is, like, Democrats have to figure out how we talk about things, when we talk about them, how we talk about them, and what we're talking about. Because I think we forget, and I say this to my candidates all the time, you get to decide what you talk about, not the interviewer. You get to talk about the words that come out of your mouth are yours. And, like, on trans issues, like, I'm sure you guys have seen it, but there's now what is probably, like, in my opinion, one of the best political ads ever made. I don't endorse the contents of it, but there was an ad about Kamala Harris talking about transgender inmates getting a gender reassignment surgery. And then the ad ends by saying Kamala Harris is for they, them, not us. However you feel about the morality and ethics of that, it's gross, made me feel gross. It's an incredible ad. It's incredibly othering. It's very memorable. And it makes it pretty clear, like, hey, Kamala Harris is for anybody but you. And in the transgender community, like, there's a lot of Democrats, like Democratic members of Congress, who are now like, we should abandon the trans issues and we should not be talking about transgender people. And like, I don't agree with that at all. I think that's wrong. I don't think we should be throwing anybody off of the boat. But I do think we need to figure out how we talk about these issues in a way that's relatable to the vast majority of people. And when we talk about like, and I don't want to be reductive, but like, turns out that most people, I think in most countries, don't have a very favorable opinion of inmates. So there's not a lot of sympathy there. And if we're talking about like transgender issues, we should be talking about like access to housing, and we should be talking about their right to get a job and their right to live their own life. And we should be talking about freedom and leaning into that. And we should be fighting it on terrain that people can more broadly understand. And when we start talking about like sports, and when we start talking about, like the inmate stuff, we sound weird. And like part of it's, I don't understand why Kamala was ever talking about that in the first place. And again, I think like they gave them a clip and then they came up with a concept that was really strong and they used it to bash us over the head with it. Now, I don't think that ad is the reason we lost the election, but I think it probably peeled off enough voters that like it could be responsible for the margin in more places. It was the third most effective attack ad that the Trump campaign had, and they poured an incredible amount of money into it.
I mean, there's definitely something. I mean, it's interesting you bring that up because I got sent some interesting stats. We opened this up a little bit to some of the groups that we work with and to our viewers, and someone sent me some stats suggesting that Biden in 2020 voters who did not vote for Harris, who say their top issue was ending Israel's violence in Gaza in key battleground states, was huge. 38% in Arizona, 32% in Michigan, 32% in Wisconsin, 19% in Pennsylvania. And that, I was like, wow. And then trans issues have been brought up as well, being a divisive factor that's being used obviously by the Republicans to sort of, I mean, it's what we call over here culture wars. I'm sure you guys have something similar. It's just trying to find an enemy that everyone can then focus on and go, they're different, so they're the problem. And it's like, 1930s Nazi Germany stuff. It's a classic trope that's always been used through history. Just point, when the economy's bad, point at the other people coming in and go, they're the fault. So that was quite interesting. That any thoughts on those stats?
Well, I tend to, just based on the things that I've seen, I think the Gaza piece is a little bit overblown in terms of it being a deciding factor in the election. It was an issue. And I think like my general take on it is like the entire conflict is incredibly frustrating and complicated. And I feel bad for everybody because I know that like Israelis and Palestinians, the vast majority of them would just like to live their lives in safety and peace and not have to deal with politicians, engaging in war crimes and making the situation a lot more volatile than it needs to be. And I just fundamentally believe that. But look, I mean, Kamala Harris was the most liberal candidate in the race on Gaza by far. Yeah. And Donald Trump, if it were up to Donald Trump, there wouldn't be a Gaza. There wouldn't be Palestinians. And so like, while I am deeply, deeply sympathetic to the cause of the Palestinians, and I'm deeply sympathetic to the violence that has happened on both sides. And I think you can't deny that there's been violence on both sides. Like what happened to Israeli hostages is horrific. And I do believe that Hamas is a terrorist organization. And I have very little sympathy for people in the United States that are like waving Hamas flags. I think they're ridiculous. I think you can support the plight of the Palestinian people, which is a legitimate cause, without endorsing a terrorist organization that's fighting for that cause, right? I have a real problem with that. But I will say, I do think it peeled out voters. I think those voters were making a mistake, and were letting their emotion override the logic of the race. Because and they got a ceasefire deal this week. Hopefully it takes effect and they keep it. I know it's like wobbling a little bit today because the Israeli parliament decided to delay their vote. But if that continues, that conflict continues, Netanyahu and Trump are going to obliterate Gaza. That's what they're going to do. And it would be way worse than if it was Kamala, who was, I think, took a fairly reasonable position on it. It's a worse situation now because of it.
What about the trans issue? I know I threw those stats that you related to Gaza, but also with trans issues, do you think that was something that brought in votes for Trump, or do you think it took votes away from Harris?
I think
that video went viral.
Yeah, I think it either did two things. It may have either brought votes to Trump, although I have a tough time with that because I think there's two reasons you run an attack ad like that. It's either because you think it draws out your base in a way that you're not already drawing them out. And in my opinion, Trump has always maximized his base. That is every election that Trump's been on the ballot, his base comes out because they love him and they're there for him. I think it's more that there were probably lots of moderate voters in the suburbs that chose not to vote. And they were like, I hate Trump. Kamala seems fine. This stuff is weird though. And that makes me, forget it. I'm just not even going to go. I'm busy and I'm not going to go. And I think you get a lot of people that kind of get turned off by the whole thing. And a big part of it is like people don't want to vote for stuff they think is weird and stuff they don't understand. And that ad is very othering to Kamala Harris. So I can imagine, like, I mean, a lot of Kamala Harris's strategy was, let me go town to town with Liz Cheney and do a town hall about why we need a patriotic coalition that's going to stand up to fascism. And like, I don't think that was the wrong strategy. Like, there's lots of people who tell you it was the wrong strategy. I don't know that that's the case. I don't have the information that they do, but what I do know is that running ads on transgender issues like blunts that, because I think the same people who care about that are also going to care about this. And that's the part where it's othering. And that's the part where if we could frame it like we did with LGBTQ rights, coming out of like 2004, we lost to George W. Bush. We lost the popular vote. It's basically the same situation we're in today. And, you know, 10 years later, marriage equality is all across the United States, and it's much more accepting now, to the point where Republican father, like I have a Republican father, he's voted Republican. I think he voted for Jimmy Carter, was his first presidential candidate, and has voted Republican every election since then. I mean, he officiated my brother's wedding, and he voted for Trump 3 times. So, or at least twice. He might have voted like libertarian one year, maybe the first year, but you get progress on that when you talk about the issues in a way that's more relatable to people that they can understand, and people can understand your fundamental right to marry. They can understand your fundamental right to have a job. They can understand your fundamental right to housing. They can't understand the other stuff. And it's not reasonable to ask them to. I just don't think it's reasonable because there's such a small number of transgender people in the United States. I don't know what percentage of the population it is, but I know it's like far less than like 5%. And you're just not going to interact with as many people. And so it's harder to do that in the way you did with LGBTQ folks, which there's much more people. So it's, how do you make these issues relatable to people so that they can understand and you create the progress that you want?
Makes me think of Cambridge Analytica and the work that they did in the first Trump election, because one of their key tactics was to put you off voting. That was one of the key assets within Cambridge Analytica's work, from what we saw in the documentaries that did all the research into it.
4 years ago, tens of thousands of normally Democratic-supporting black voters just didn't turn out for Hillary Clinton. And now we can reveal for the first time that many of them had been identified and targeted by the Trump campaign and its supporters.
Highly personal information was bought, harvested, and used, all perfectly legal under America's data laws. They knew whether you're likely to own a dog or a gun, whether you're likely to get married or planning a baby.
But it's not just what they knew about individual people, it's what they did with all the data.
In 16 key battleground states, the algorithm placed voters into one of 8 categories. Most likely to turn out was the base, core Trump on his side, core Clinton on hers. Those least likely to vote were marked as deadbeats and then disengaged for both sides. In the middle were the voters who might go either way and were open to persuasion. But also crucial were these 2 segments. On his side, they were called GOTV, get out the vote, and on the other, deterrence, voters who might be encouraged not to vote. In those crucial swing states, black voters were disproportionately categorized for deterrence. In Georgia, they made up 32% of the population, but 61% of deterrence. In North Carolina, 22% of the population, but 46% of deterrence. And in Michigan, 15% of people, but 33% of deterrence. In total, more than 3.5 million black voters were marked for deterrence. If you include other ethnic minorities, they made up 54% of the deterrence segment.
It was
I think the Cambridge Analytica stuff is completely overblown.
Really?
Overblown. I don't think it had a significant impact on the election. They were doing stuff that they shouldn't have been allowed to do, no doubt about that. But I don't buy the, when I've watched that stuff or when I've read like papers on it, I'm always like, this feels overblown. This doesn't feel like what it is. And there's always like every cycle, there's like 1 or 2 things that somebody claims, this is what won the election for so-and-so. And really it's like a confluence of things. But again, I'm a very simplistic political pundit. Like, I don't think politics is very complicated. I think it's very like self-interested. And I think there's cool tactics that people do, but I don't think Cambridge Analytica was doing nearly as much interesting stuff as they thought. So, but they were breaking the law and they were doing things they shouldn't have been allowed to do with information they shouldn't have had. So
yeah, data harvesting on some sort of insane level, like
right.
And then it's interesting to see that. I mean, the Channel 4 documentary was pretty persuasive.
I haven't
in terms
seen
of
that.
like it just showed the statistical data how they were targeted and then whether or not it had an effect. But it was only on, I think, 2 or 3 states. It didn't do it nationwide. So then you beg the question, well, was it just on those 2 or 3 states? Or was it a nationwide effect to be able to put people off? But it seems like what you're saying here is that ad that they released had the potential for a similar sort of effect of just making people go, I don't like Trump, but I'm not enamored with Harris, so I'm not going to go and vote, and I'll just leave it to the gods, as it were, or to the rest of the populace to make a decision. And that's what I find fascinating about it.
Yeah, I think people need to be motivated to leave their house, and people hate both sides, and I think we forget that the vast majority of people hate both of us for different reasons. They don't like us. Andrew Yang got destroyed on Twitter a couple weeks ago when he tweeted this, when I actually thought it was right. He just tweeted, like, if you give people 2 shitty options, they'll pick one. And I think about that all the time, because it was like, it's really simple political analysis. Like, I don't think it's wrong. But you got to give people a reason to go out, and like people believed in Barack Obama, and they got up and they went out. And like, I think the 2016 version of Trump, there were a lot of people who believed in that. And he has an amazing critique of the system, and he'll tell you, like, the system is rigged, and I know because I used it to become a billionaire, and here's how, and I'm going to help unrig the system for you. It's an amazing critique. It's garbage, because all he's gonna do is transfer wealth to himself and his rich buddies, and the American people are going to suffer. And then likely what I think will happen is he'll crash the damn economy again, and a Democrat will have to take over in 4 years and fix it, and then get blamed because the recovery isn't as fast as they'd like it to be. Because that's the cycle we're in right now. Bush crashed the economy, and then Trump crashed the economy, and then Obama and Biden had to go fix it. But he has an amazing, FDR. FDR is a perfect example, except FDR got to serve 4 terms. Like, honestly, if we didn't have term limits, Obama would probably still be president right now. His hair would just be much grayer than it is.
Yeah.
There's a meme that I saw, that the photo of Obama and Trump talking at Jimmy Carter's funeral that everybody was obsessed with. I saw a meme that was like, well, we'll get rid of the amendment with term limits, and you and me will go at it 4 years from now and just find out.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen some good ones for that.
My reaction to that was, oh, that sounds horrible, but wait, I'm kind of into this. It's sort of like a pay-per-view. It was like Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. Where I was like, I'm kind of.
Oh God, that was awful.
It was an awful fight.
That was awful.
But I watched it.
It will be like when Barack Obama told Mitt Romney we have less bayonets and less cavalry and things like that, and I was like, oh, he's done him here. You're done.
He hasn't spent enough time looking at how our military works. You mentioned the Navy, for example, and that we have fewer ships than we did in 1916. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military's changed. We have these things called aircraft carriers where planes land on them. We have these ships that go underwater, nuclear submarines. And so the question is not a game of battleship where we're counting ships. It's what are our capabilities?
You done it. That was one of the best quotes all time, honestly.
My all-time favorite presidential debate moment, I'm just gonna get it out there while I have this platform, is in the 2004 presidential debate. John Kerry is calling out George W. Bush for not building a very large coalition to invade Iraq, and he keeps going, it's America, it's the UK, and that's it. Where's the rest of the world? We don't have France, we don't have Germany or whatever. And George W. Bush is in the background. He picks up his microphone and goes, don't forget about Poland.
When we went in, there were 3 countries, Great Britain, Australia, and the United States. That's not a grand coalition. We can do better. 30 seconds.
Well, actually, you forgot Poland.
And I laughed, like, I was like 16. I laughed so hard at that.
The thing is, you say that now, and Poland's no joke.
I know.
Poland's got like the strongest ones in Europe. So if you said that now, everyone's like, yeah, let's go. We got Poland.
Hey, if you were Poland and you were watching the Soviet Union expand their territories, wouldn't you also want the strongest military possible?
No, they do. They've got it. They're cracked.
I know Poland's like a hotbed of like right-wing social stuff, but like, I mean, protect your land, guys. You've been, every time there's a world war, you're the first place that gets invaded. So God love you. I worry about them.
I'm not so worried right now.
Let's go on to the. I mean,
the Russian military, like they can't conquer Ukraine right now. So like, why are they going to be able to take on Poland?
Yeah, that was always it. When I saw the troop movements and they were surrounding Ukraine, I was like, that's got to be posturing because they don't have the economy to be able to hold that land. It's just impossible unless they want to do a quick strike and knock out the president, which is what they originally wanted to do. But there's no way they could hold that territory. They've got their economy's the size of Spain. It's twice the size of the United States. I think Do you want to guess how many motorways they've got? The whole of Russia.
I guess it's a small amount.
10.
10. Wow,
It's 10. It's 10. 10 motorways. How can you have 10 motorways and be twice the size? The United States? That just boggles my mind. It's like clearly just siphoned all the cash off and not invested in infrastructure.
Right. That reminds me of so I did the Montana Senate race for John Tester, who unfortunately lost, was a Democrat. And he told me that he asked me once on a call, he was like, what's the number of escalators that we have in the state of Montana? And I was like, I don't know, like 100. Like, it's not a big, I mean, it's a huge state land wise, but it's not, I don't know, people, there's like 100. And he goes, we have like 6. There's like 6 escalators and they're all in the airport or something. And I was like, what? How do you only have 6 escalators? Like,
take the stairs, old school.
Incredible.
It's just John Tester walking up the stairs. It's like, bloody, where's my escalator? I've had enough of this. We have 6.
I'm like, I live in Chicago. I'm pretty sure I could throw a rock in any direction and hit 6 escalators. Like, oh, man.
What's that? Is that one of the wackiest things you've ever heard? Is maybe a campaign policy that could have actually worked? I'm going to build escalators.
No, I don't think it wasn't a campaign policy. We were like filling time before the call started. Like, it wasn't even. No, if I start telling you about the crazy conversations I've had with members of Congress, we'd be here all day. You're gonna have to buy me some Guinness before I do that.
Job done. Yeah, I'm game. Right. it's on the post right now.
yeah, right.
Well, tell us what the wackiest thing is. The most surprising thing that's worked for you in your campaigns.
This is the most surprising thing that's worked.
Yeah, the wackiest as well. If you can combine or separate.
I can't. I gotta protect client confidentiality on most things that are popping into my head.
Why don't you talk about the British people that you helped in their election? And
well, I didn't do Britain. I worked with.
No. I'm suggesting to falsify it and talk about the British candidate. That didn't help.
Yeah. I'll tell you just one of the like tactics that I one of the things I enjoyed working on was I did Adam Schiff's Senate race in California, and in most American races, each party gets a nominee, right? So the Democrats nominate somebody and the Republicans nominate someone. In California, they have a winner take all kind of thing. So it's all the candidates are in one giant primary, and then the top 2 vote getters advance to the general. So it's pretty common for there to be like 2 Democrats competing in the general election in California because it's such a blue state. So, and this is public knowledge. This is not, it's interesting to me because I just enjoyed doing it. But we had a Republican, whose name was Steve Garvey. He's a famous baseball player, and he was running, and he was, and we started attacking him. And because we attacked him in the primary, his name ID went up with Republicans, and he made the general election. So we didn't have to face a Democrat in the general. And like, that's, public information. You could find that. But like, I thought that was like an interesting campaign to work on.
Is that almost like pushing the worst candidate forward? So that's the best that you've got to deal with.
Well, I think, you don't want to have to face a Democrat. You'd rather face a Republican in general. I mean, then that's happened before. Like, that's not like, it wasn't like a groundbreaking thing, but I think it was an interesting thing to do. So
interesting.
That's the first thing that just pops into my head. I've done a lot of weird shit. American politics is very weird.
Yeah.
Anytime I meet a practitioner from another country, they look to me like they're like, oh, you guys are doing such innovative stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm just doing weird shit. That's all that it is. Just weird. Trying to keep my head above water, trying to find out which country we're invading today. What Donald Trump thinks is causing cancer. Just bummer. And meanwhile, I just want to like clock out at 5 and hang out with my kid and like drink a beer and watch a football game. That's really all that I want. So
one of the best ads I ever saw was, I think it was for a senator, where the wife came out and was basically demanding that we all vote for the senator.
Room to put 2,700 people in our jail, and it costs us about $103 a day.
Gerald really doesn't have any hobbies.
Last year's tax rate was 0.4169. This year, we could take that down to 3.838.
So is he always like that?
Yeah, all the time. Most people leave their work at the office.
We got 3 light rail cars.
All he wants to do is fix things.
So I got this 18-wheeler that's parked in this neighborhood, spewing fumes all over the place, but quite frankly, it's not a code violation. I think I like helping around the house here.
Please re-elect Gerald. Please.
Amanda
stops talking to her about politics. I was like, that's genius. That's actually genius. You're doing her a favor and letting him loose on the public. On that note, thank you very much, Mike. That is you. And my wonderful co-host, Madge. Thank you so much.
in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.
Madge, would you rather work for Trump for the rest of your life or live with Boris Johnson until you're 60?
I'm going to go work for Trump because he's got like 5 years left in him max. And I can't lie, I've got more than 5 years in me. So I'm going, I don't know who Boris Johnson's bringing home for. I've heard stories. I'm not living with that man.
We've heard stories. Okay, Mike, would you rather work for Musk on X or work for Zuckerberg on Facebook?
Oh, that's
I'd rather work for Zuckerberg. I'd rather work for Zuckerberg. That's the easy one.
Yeah.
That's an easy one?
Looks like normal crazy.
Could we do TikTok?
Which one's taking less ketamine?
Yeah. Elon Musk or TikTok? Which one would you rather work for then? Elon Musk or the guys at TikTok?
I'd rather work for TikTok. TikTok's an incredible app. Okay, they might be using it for horrible stuff, but it's an incredible app.
Yeah.
And final game. You got 3 people. Now we've been talking about Musk and Valentine's Day is coming up. So it's love, marry, send to Mars.
All right.
Okay.
Madge, Piers Morgan, Kanye West, Tucker Carlson.
All right. What's the love, marry, or and what
Send
Mars?
to Mars.
So I got Tucker Carlson, Kanye West, and
Piers Morgan.
I'd marry Tucker Carlson because he's rich. I'd send Piers Morgan to Mars because I hate that guy, and I'd love Kanye West because I'd just be like, look, just get off the drugs, bro. Just get off the drugs. We can help you. I can save him. Okay.
Save him.
I can save him. I can save him because I can tell you now there's one talented music producer in there. I can save Kanye West. I'm like, please get off the drugs, and we can do this.
Okay, Mike. Love, marry, send to Mars.
Okay.
Donald Trump.
All right.
Nigel Farage. Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Fucking
shit.
That's diabolical. That is. That's actually diabolical.
I swap in Piers Morgan for one of the. I've done Pierce's show. It was an experience.
That Jordan Peterson one that he just did, that was literally batshit, and he just allowed him to talk. It was fucking wild listening to Peterson not know what he was talking about.
I think honestly, I said Nigel Farage to Mars. I don't think I can do that.
Let's go. Let's go.
Right, so Farage to Mars.
I think
that means you got to love Trump or marry.
I think I would. I think I would love Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I would marry Trump in that scenario because at least then I'm the first gentleman. You know. It doesn't seem like Melania sees him very much. So, like, what's the impact on my life? He has to trot me out for an occasional event that I get paid to attend. Like,
and like his wife, you don't have to spend the same time in the bedroom.
You could be in New York. Yeah, you could be in Chicago.
I get to decorate the White House for Christmas. I could do a better job than she did.